This one here is a 2-in-1. Why? Because we got something super good? Nah. If you read the title, you know it's Golem. But hey, let's jump on into it and let's see if these two will rock you. One might, I don't know. So we're looking at both forms of Golem because they both have the exact same stats, and despite having different typings and abilities, their moves can be pretty interchangeable. Now, Alolan Golem does have access to electric type moves that regular Golem does not, but other than that, there's not much difference in the overlap between what one can learn and what the other cannot. So, all things considered, we're going to be looking at the abilities and the typings and terrestrial options when building around the golems. They do have the exact same stat breakdown with 80 HP, 120 attack, 130 defense, 55 special attack, 65 special defense, and 45 speed. The big takeaway here is they have great physical bulk with that 130 defense and 80 HP working in their favor, and they're relatively slow at 45, so Trick Room is definitely a great option. Now, the 65 special defense could use a little bit of patching, but if they stay as rock types, then they can get the 50% boost to their special defense from Sandstorm. So that is definitely an option. So let's take a look at Kantonian Golem first. As far as its typing goes, it's rock ground. It's immune to electric. It has a 4 times resistance to poison. Then it resists fire, flying, normal, and rock while being weak to ice, ground, fighting, and steel, and having 2 4 times weaknesses to grass and water. So being able to terrestrialize into a different type to make sure that you're no longer 4 times weak to grass and water is going to be huge for the original Golem here, because those are 2 extremely common typings that we have to be weary of. As far as regular Golem's abilities go, we have Rockhead, which means it cannot take any recoil damage from recoil causing moves. Unfortunately, this thing only gets 2 recoil causing moves in the first place, with that being Takedown and Double Edge. Double Edge is a relatively solid move to have at your disposal. It's base 120 normal type damage, but unfortunately, you can't really build that huge of a strategy around it because it's the only recoil move that Golem gets. Now, if Golem happened to get Head Smash, then things could be a little bit spicier, because then that way you do have a stab rock type move with no drawback at that point. As far as our other abilities go, we have Sturdy. So basically, if you're at full HP, you will survive with 1 HP. So it's a built-in focus sash. That can be relatively handy. Sturdy is also the one and only ability that the 2 golems share in common. So just keep that in mind. As far as our hidden ability goes, is it's Sandville. So when Sand is active, we can gain an evasion boost, and if you're not naturally immune to Sandstorm chip damage, you gain immunity to that. So basically, if you're not a rock type, ground type, or steel type, you don't have to worry about taking a little bit of chip damage from the sand if you're a different type. So that can be a little bit nice on regular Golem if you're playing on a sand team but using a different Terra option, because then you don't have to worry about a little bit of chip damage. Now, it's a little underwhelming when you look at it. There's the whole reason why Alolan Golem is a thing, and it's because the original Golem needed a revamping, a retuning. So that is definitely a thing. Now, what you can consider, though, is running the Sandveil on regular Golem, and then you could probably have a little bit of luck with dodging some attacks, especially if you pair this thing with a Bright Powder to hold, so that the accuracy on your opponents is lowered a little bit. Regular Kantonian Articuno can do this with its hidden ability of Snowcloak in the snow, so Golem might to a lesser extent be able to do this, and because this thing is in Terra raids, it's not impossible to get Sandveil, and you don't have to worry about wasting a ability patch to do so. Now let's talk about Alolan Golem's abilities and type breakdown before we get any further. Alright, so with Alolan Golem here, we are a rock electric type, which means we have a 4 times resistance to flying. We resist fire, electric, normal, and poison while being weak to water, grass, and fighting. And the nice thing here is it's a regular weakness to both water and grass, as opposed to a 4 times weakness. But we do have a 4 times weakness to ground, unfortunately, so we do have to be careful that way. Now, as far as our abilities on Alolan Golem go, we have Magnet Pull as one of our 2 standard abilities, which prevents Steel-type Pokemon from being able to switch out. This can be pretty nice depending on the situation. If you're running a Body Press set, which both this Golem and regular Golem get, you can get the upper hand on some Steel types that way that might not want to appreciate taking that Body Press damage, especially since that's coming off a base 130 defense stat right there. We do have Sturdy in common with the other Golem. And then finally, our hidden ability is Galvanize. So basically, Galvanize turns normal type attacks into electric types and gives it a 20% boost in power as well. So you don't necessarily have to run a straight up electric type move on a Alolan Golem. You can run a normal type move and then get a 20% boost in power from Galvanize. And then that way too, you don't have to worry about ghosts being able to outright dodge those attacks because now they're electric types. Now you do have to worry about ground types, but that's a different discussion. So Galvanize is probably the best ability on Alolan Golem, and between the two Golems, it's probably the best ability out of the 5 that are listed. So regardless of which Golem you want to use, you do have to consider your various Terra options. So what you could do is you could go Terra Rock, which would give both Golems double stab on rock type attacks. It would also give them a 50% special defense boost in the sand if you wanted to play around with a sand team. This could be really nice to take advantage of the Sand Veil on Kantonian Golem, or Alolan Golem would still appreciate it at the end of the day because they both have that base 65 special defense stat, so we'll patch that up a little bit with that 50% boost. If we wanted to, we could go Terra Ground, which would give Kantonian Golem double stab, and then its Earthquakes would be able to easily clear the board coming off that base 120 attack stat. Some good partners to have would be anything with the Telepathy ability, or form with its Earth Eater ability would be relatively solid, or you could just use Protect on your partner Pokemon to make sure you don't hit them at the same time. If you wanted to go Terra Electric to give Alolan Golem some double stab, that would synergize really nicely with Galvanize, since Galvanize is already turning normal type attacks into electric type moves and giving them a 20% power boost to begin with. On top of that, regardless of if you use this on regular Golem or Alolan Golem, it'll give you a paralysis immunity, meaning you don't have to worry about potentially missing your turn. You don't have to worry about the speed drop from paralysis because both Golems are so slow to begin with, but losing your turn could be devastating for both of these Golems. You could go Terra Grass to gain a powder move immunity, and plus Terra Grass would be able to cover for the grass and water weakness that both Golems share. You don't have to worry about taking major damage from both of those attacks if you do go into Terra Grass. You could go Terra Fire to have a burn immunity. You do have that base 120 attack stat, so making sure that doesn't get neutered is going to be really nice with that fire immunity, or fire Terra type preventing burns. Then you could go Terra Steel, which is just an overall great defensive typing. Both Golems learn Gyro Ball, and because they're so slow, Gyro Ball is going to do a lot of damage to begin with. And if you get Trick Room up on the field, having Gyro Ball with Stab being able to go before many other Pokemon could be really worth your while. And then both Pokemon get Body Press as well, so Terra Fighting could be nice to give Body Press Stab as well. Alright, so now that we've looked at some Terra options, let's take a look at some moveset ideas. And for the first one here, we're going to go with a Sand Veil, Assault Vest, Kantonian Golem. We're going to put this Golem on a Sand team, and we're going to let Sand Veil work its magic and allow us to potentially dodge some hits with having that evasion boost while Sand is active. We're going to use the Assault Vest here to patch up our special defense as well. This will limit us to only being able to use damaging moves, but we have a base 120 attack stat to work with, so I think that's a fair trade to gain a 50% boost to our special defense. And plus, this will stack with the Sand, so if Sand is active and we're still a rock type, we're going to have 2 sets of 50% boosts right there working in our special defense. And alternatively, if we decide that we're going to Terra away from the rock type, we're not going to be a sitting duck on the specially defensive front because we still have the Assault Vest working in our favor. So as far as some EVs go, what I was thinking was we could actually focus more on the physical side here with Golem. I've got 84 EVs into our HP to bring us up to 166, and then I brought both the attack stat and the defense stat up to 180, which is a fairly respectable number at the end of the day. You're going to be denting some walls relatively easily with that 180, and physical attacks are going to be bouncing right off of you with that 180. So the other thing too is if you have some screen support, you're really going to be living hits. And on top of that, if you have house support from a partner, you're going to be wrecking things too. Alternatively, you could also use terrestrialization to further increase your damage output. You're limited to damaging moves with the Assault Vest. So what I was thinking for Terra options here is either go double stab on Terra Ground or Terra Rock, or use a stab type with your Terra on one of your coverage moves. So the main damaging moves here I have are Earthquake, Rock Slide, Gyro Ball, and Body Press. Now you can use some alternative moves as well, which we'll get into as we get into each individual move. So what I was thinking with Earthquake here was we could use that to clear the opponent's board. It's a spread move, it's base 100 power. If you wanted to go Terra Ground, that would increase its power to base 200 at the end of the day. Now, one thing you do have to be considerate about with Earthquake is it also hits your partner Pokemon, so you would want either a flying type, a telepathy mon, or being able to just go for a protecting move. If you can't go for a protecting move because you did one on the previous turn, or if your opponent just hit you with a taunt, Earthquake could be a little bit dangerous. So a nice alternative to Earthquake could actually be High Horsepower. It's a little bit weaker at 95 as opposed to 100, but 5 points isn't going to be the end of the world. It's 95 accuracy, which is still relatively safe, and it's a nice single target move, meaning you can choose who you want to hit if you're worried about your opponent potentially switching in a flying type into one of the slots to dodge an Earthquake. Well, you don't have to worry about that because you just got to look into the protections and just go for that High Horsepower. You could use Rock Slide for your main rock type damage if you want. It's a nice spread move here that doesn't hit your side of the field, so you could potentially make your opponents flinch if you have Trick Room up on the field, which could be really nice for Golem as some general support anyway. So you could do that. You could use Terra Rock to increase your power from 75 to 150, which that would dent a lot of things. And alternatively, too, if you didn't want to run Rock Slide and just go raw power, what you could do is you could take Rock Slide out and run Stone Edge. It's a base 100 single target rock type move with a slightly boosted critical hit ratio. Now, you do have to be careful with that 80 accuracy, but that could be a relatively solid trade to go for as well. So as far as our two coverage options, we have Gyro Ball and Body Press. Gyro Ball does more damage the slower the user is than the target, so the fact that Golem only has base 45 speed, we could, instead of running an Adamant Nature, run a Brave Nature, and then that way too we're getting even slower, meaning Gyro Ball is going to hit most things relatively hard. The metagame got really fast with Generation 9 with the introduction of Fluttermane, Chien Pao, Iron Bundle, so the fact that Golem is so slow, it means it's going to do a lot of damage with that Gyro Ball. Now, alternatively too, as far as Steel type coverage goes, if you wanted to run that, you could run Heavy Slam, which would take advantage of the fact that Golem is a relatively heavier Pokemon as well, so it would do more damage that way. Or you could run Iron Head for just some consistent base 80 power damage. And then finally, Body Press is the last move that I have here. Body Press is going to take advantage of the fact that it uses the user's defense stat instead of the attack stat to do damage. That's why I paired the 180 for the attack and defense to make it the same. We're not losing out on any power that way. If we wanted to go Terra fighting with that, we'll be doing heavy damage with Body Press as well. And speaking of Body Press, that's actually going to be what the next set is, but I do want to make one quick note before we jump away from that, and that is the fact that because we're an Assault Vest user, we do have to be weary of getting burned. So what I was thinking for another alternative here, if you wanted to, was you could actually run Facade. Facade would double in power if you get a status condition, and plus, if you are burned, Facade does ignore that drop, so at least Facade wouldn't be completely destroyed that way. So that would be an alternative solution to the burn problem. You could also just run a Cresselia with its healing move. I'm pretty sure it's Lunar Blessing. That could be relatively handy to have next to a Golem as well. So just keep that in mind. So moving on, let's talk about the body press set that I just mentioned, and that is going to be Iron Defense Body Press. We're going to use Iron Defense to increase our defense 2 stages each time we use it, and that means we don't necessarily have to worry about increasing our attack EVs or our speed, obviously, because we're so slow. So we're going to focus more on the special defense EVs because we don't have the Assault Vest anymore. And what I was thinking for the ability is, while you could still run Sandveil, Sturdy might be another ability to consider, and then that way, at least it's a built-in focus sash. At least you have that in your back pocket to make sure that you survive. But what I was thinking here with this set, Iron Defense is naturally going to be increasing our defense stat 2 stages each time we use it, so we can invest more into our special defense. I put max investment into our HP and 236 EVs on a careful nature to bring our special defense up to 126. You're probably going to want to have Sandveil or Sandstorm active to make sure that you're getting a special defense boost just to help keep Golem around. So that's not a bad idea to have in your back pocket. And we're going to be using Body Press as our main primary damage, but just to make sure that we're not walled by ghost types, I do have high horsepower here. And if you didn't necessarily want to run Iron Defense, you could run Curse. Curse would make you slower, so that would help your turn order in Trick Room, but it would also increase your attack stat in addition to your defense stat, so at least that way too, Body Press isn't the only thing getting powered up when you go for your setup move. But that's mainly what I was thinking for regular Kantonian Golem, between the Body Press set and the Assault Vest set. Now, you could make a case for running either of these on the Alolan Golem, because Alolan Golem gets access to these moves as well. Now, let's jump into Alolan Golem. Okay, we're finally talking Alolan Golem, and therefore we're talking Galvanize. What's going to be fun with this here is that Golem is going to be a solid wall breaker. Galvanize increases the power of normal type attacks by 20% and then turns them into electric type moves, thus giving them stab, thus giving them even more firepower. What we're going to do here is we're going to give Golem the Clear Amulet as our main item of choice. This will keep our base 120 attack stat safe from Intimidate, as well as any attack reducing moves. What we're also going to do too is we're going to get a Trick Room setter and pair that with Golem. Golem is absurdly slow, and therefore it's going to flourish under Trick Room once it's set up, especially because we have that Galvanize boosting the power of our normal type attacks. You could make the case for running a Choice Band instead and then setting Trick Room up while Golem is still in the back, but having the flexibility of being able to select Protect is going to be handy, especially if you have to set a Trick Room up while Golem is on the field. Being able to Protect will definitely keep Golem safe. Here's the other thing too. If your opponent realizes what you're doing and they have a ground type Pokemon and they switch that in, your normal type attacks are not going to do anything because Galvanize is making them electric type moves, and thus the ground types will be immune. And plus, you never know on the ladder if your opponent has Terra Ground as an option. If you're playing it in open team sheet format, that works out a little bit better in your favor, but on the open ladder, you're not going to know that information. So having that flexibility is going to be handy. What I was thinking as far as the EVs go is we're going to go 236 into our HP to go up to 185. We're going to go 228 into our attack to go up to 169. Keep in mind, Galvanize is still increasing the power of that normal type attack, so you don't have to worry too much about going full investment. Thus, that gives you a little bit of room to invest into your special defense. Because what we're also going to do with this Golem is we're going to use this as a Terra option. We can go Terra Electric to insane levels of damage with a normal type attack being Galvanized, or we can go Terra Flying to be outright immune to ground type attacks, or Terra Grass would give us a resistance to that. We'll be able to play defensively with our Terra option on this set if we want to, or we can go offensively. And plus, the nice thing here too is Golem has a nice natural base 130 defense. So if we go Terra and resist an attack that would otherwise have been super effective, that move will probably bounce off of us if it's a physical move. And if it was a special attack, we might live it better than as opposed to being not Terra'd and having no investment at all. So what was I thinking for the damaging moves? Well, we're going to talk about our coverage moves first before we get into the normal type attacks, because I have 3 main candidates for that. What I was thinking for our first coverage move is we have body press. We're going to take advantage of the fact that we have such a nice, naturally high defense stat right there to use body press with. Fighting type attacks will hit steel types, and steel types, you do see a fair amount of them that are either neutral to electric or have part ground in their typing, so being able to hit them is still going to be handy. We have Rock Slide for if we have Trick Room up on the field. The nice flinch odds are going to be relatively handy. Now, you could also make a case for running Terra Blast, and then therefore Terra Blast will also help if you're not running a electric Terra. If you're running Terra Grass or Terra Flying, that could be huge as well to have that coverage at your disposal. So let's talk the normal type moves. This is what we were mainly waiting for. The first one I was thinking of is Facade. It's the lowest out of the 3 moves that I have picked out at base 70 power, but it does double if you have a status condition. So if you unfortunately get burned or poisoned or paralyzed, well, at least you're now going up to a base 140 move right there that's now getting a 20% boost from Galvanize and now gaining Stab. That's fun. Another alternative that I was thinking to Facade is Body Slam. Body Slam is base 85 power. It also has a 30% chance to paralyze the opponent, thus meaning there's some good odds of your opponent missing their turn. It's definitely got little to no drawback there, and plus it's a nice benefit if you do paralyze your opponent. And then finally, the wildest of the moves, and this is not Wild Edge, it's Double Edge. I just made a new attack, Wild Edge. Anyways, Double Edge. Double Edge, this is going to be the strongest of the 3 normal type attacks that I was thinking, but it's also going to have the biggest drawback because it does have 33% recoil. You have base 120 power, getting a 20% boost from Galvanize and Stab. You're looking at 216 roughly on just regular Stab, and if you go Terra Electric, you're looking at 288 power. That's stronger than Explosion. Yeah, you're going to take a lot of recoil, but whatever's taking that Double Edge, that's probably fainting unless it's a ground type. So there's that. So let's talk about the last and final moveset, the other Alolan Golem moveset that I was thinking, and that is Galvanize Explosion. If the first set was a wall breaker, this is a nuke. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to run Explosion with a Trick Room partner setting that up for us. Ideally, Oranguru is going to be nice because Oranguru has telepathy as well. We go Life Orb to increase our damage as well by a third. So that's going to be handy. We have Galvanize to further increase Explosion's power. 20% off of 250 just automatically brings it up to 300 power right there, and that's not even factoring in the Stab boost. Explosion is going to be fun. The ultimate trade-off though is Golem is going to faint, so you only get the one and done, but hey, it's nice because ghost types cannot be immune to it unless they have the ground typing added into them, so you're just going to delete everything. Anyways, guys, that's the main thoughts on both Kantonian and Alolan Golems. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and let's get the conversation going.